Hey, wait for me. Come back here, you two.
There are moments that happen in a single second that carry the weight of years.
Hey,
Moments that
wait
don't
for me.
announce
Come back
themselves.
here, you two.
Moments that don't give you time to prepare, to brace, or even to breathe. And what nobody in that hotel lobby knew yet was this. The man those children were about to run to had been lied to for 6 years by someone he trusted more than anyone else in the world. Moments like this don't just change your day. They split your entire life in two. Everything you thought you knew on one side, and the truth waiting on the other. What you're about to hear is one of those moments. And when it's over, you're going to ask yourself the same question everyone in that lobby did. How do you come back from something like this? And before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in Houston, Texas. The kind of afternoon where nothing is supposed to happen. The kind where you run your errands, grab your groceries, and get back home before the kids start complaining about being hungry. Diana Calloway was doing exactly that. She was 31 years old, carrying 2 full paper bags from the store, and trying to keep up with 2 5-year-old twins who moved through the world like they had somewhere very important to be and no time to waste getting there. Her son, James. Her daughter, Lily. 5 years old and full of a kind of certainty that only children that age possess. The kind that hasn't yet learned to second-guess itself. They were cutting through the lobby of a hotel on their way to the parking structure when James stopped walking. Just stopped. Mid-stride. He grabbed his sister's arm. And in a whisper that Diana did not yet hear, he said 4 words. 4 words that were about to change everything. He pointed across that marble floor at a man standing near the reception desk, and he whispered, "Lily, that's him." Before Diana could look up, before she could ask what he was pointing at, before she could do anything at all, those 2 5-year-olds were gone. Running, full speed, arms wide open, screaming at the top of their lungs across a crowded hotel lobby. "Daddy! Daddy! Mummy, we found Daddy!" Diana froze. The groceries slipped from her hands. 2 bags of groceries hit the marble floor, and she didn't even look down. She was staring at the man her children were running toward. And her heart stopped, because she knew that face. She had spent 6 years trying to forget that face. And she had failed every single time. This is the story of Diana Calloway, Marcus Webb, and the 2 children who changed everything by doing something their mother had never expected. By finding a man who didn't know he was looking for them. Stay with me, because what happened next, and what came before, is one of the most extraordinary things I have ever had to sit down and piece together. To understand what happened in that lobby, you need to understand 3 things. The first is what Diana had told James and Lily about their father since the day they were old enough to ask. The second is what Marcus Webb had been told about Diana, and about the pregnancy, 6 years before any of this happened. And the third thing, the thing that ties all of it together and makes this story the kind that keeps you up at night, is the woman who told both of them what they needed to hear in order to make them walk away from each other. Marcus's own mother, a woman named Carol Webb. Because here is what you need to understand from the start. Diana Calloway did not raise those twins alone because Marcus Webb was a bad man. She raised them alone because someone who was supposed to love Marcus, someone who was supposed to want what was best for her own son, decided that she knew better, decided that Diana was not good enough, and decided to do something about it. Something that cost Diana 6 years of her life, cost Marcus 6 years with his children, and cost James and Lily the one thing every child deserves without having to earn it. A father who knows they exist. There are 3 questions at the center of this story that we are going to answer one by one. The first, how did Marcus Webb walk away from a pregnant woman without knowing she was pregnant? The second, what exactly did Carol Webb say and do to make that possible? And the third, the question that hits hardest. When Diana and Marcus stood face to face in that hotel lobby for the first time in 6 years, with their children wrapped around a stranger's legs, what did they do with the truth? We are going to go all the way back to the beginning, to how Diana and Marcus met, to what they had together before Carol Webb decided she was going to end it. And then we're going to walk through every moment that led to that Tuesday afternoon in Houston, step by step, until you can see exactly how a person can lose 6 years of their life to a lie they never even knew was being told. Before we go back to the beginning, don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what happens next. Diana Calloway grew up in Atlanta as the youngest of 4, raised by her mother, Ruth, a hardworking hospital administrator who taught her children one simple rule: show up, do the work, and keep moving. Diana carried that mindset into adulthood like a second spine. At 24, she moved to Houston with a communications degree and a job she fought hard to earn. 3 interviews, a long drive, and 1 borrowed couch later, she made it happen. That was who Diana was, someone who figured things out, no matter what. By 26, she had built a steady life, a small apartment, a growing career, and a circle of trusted friends. She wasn't looking for love, which is exactly why, when Marcus came into her life, it wasn't planned, it just happened. They met in the fall at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. Marcus Webb was 33 at the time, and he worked as a project manager for a commercial construction company that handled large-scale contracts across the Gulf Coast region. He was not flashy. That was one of the first things Diana noticed about him, because she had grown up around men who performed their confidence like a stage act, and Marcus didn't do that. He was quiet in the way that people are quiet when they've actually thought about things. He listened when someone was talking. He didn't interrupt. And when he spoke, he said something worth hearing. Diana noticed that immediately, and she told herself she was not going to do anything about it, because she was not in the market, and because men who seem that steady in the early going don't always hold up under the weight of something real. But Marcus didn't go anywhere. That was the thing. 2 weeks after that dinner, a mutual friend organized a small get-together, and Marcus was there again. And again he was easy to be around. And again Diana told herself she was simply noting this as an observation, not acting on it. 3 months in, they were having dinner together twice a week, and she had stopped pretending she was just observing anything. By month 6, they were serious in the way that people get serious when they've both been burned before and have decided, very carefully, to trust someone again. It wasn't reckless. It wasn't a whirlwind. It was 2 adults choosing each other deliberately and with open eyes, and that made it feel more solid to Diana than anything she had experienced before. Marcus had grown up in Beaumont, Texas, about 90 miles east of Houston. He was an only child, raised primarily by his mother, Carol Webb, after his father left the family when Marcus was 11 years old. Now that detail is going to matter later. It matters enormously, because it explains a great deal about the dynamic between Marcus and Carol, and about why Marcus, when his mother told him something, tended to believe it. She was the person who had been there. She was the person who had held things together when everything fell apart. She was the person who had sacrificed, who had stayed, who had made sure Marcus became the man he became. And when your parent is also your anchor, when you owe them not just love, but the entire architecture of your survival, you don't tend to question what they tell you. You trust it the way you trust the ground under your feet. Marcus's relationship with Carol was close in the way that relationships between single mothers and their only sons can become close. Close to the point where the line between love and control gets blurry, and neither party has the vocabulary to name what's happening because it has been normal for so long. Carol had opinions about every woman Marcus had ever dated. She had always had opinions. And those opinions had always been delivered with the gentlest possible framing, wrapped up in what sounded like concern, like caution, like a mother who simply wanted the best for her son. Marcus had never fully recognized the pattern. Why would he? It had always looked, from the inside, like love. When Marcus introduced Diana to Carol about 4 months into the relationship, Diana noticed things that she filed away quietly, without letting them surface. The way Carol looked at her when Marcus wasn't watching. The way she asked questions that were shaped like compliments, but landed like assessments. The way she talked about Marcus's future in the third person, as though Diana's presence was a temporary variable in an equation whose answer Carol had already decided. Diana was raised by a woman who worked double shifts and didn't have time for games, so she recognized a power play when she encountered one. But she said nothing, because Marcus was worth the patience, and because she hoped she was misreading things. She was not misreading things. By the time Diana found out she was pregnant, she and Marcus had been together for almost a year. And she will tell you, to this day, that the 2 minutes she spent waiting for that test to finish were the most quietly terrifying 2 minutes of her life. Not because she didn't want children. She did. But because she knew that a pregnancy was going to make everything she had noticed about Carol Webb impossible to ignore any longer. She was right about that too. Diana told Marcus about the pregnancy on a Thursday evening. She had planned to wait for the right moment. But there is no right moment for news that size. You just say it, and watch what happens. Marcus went quiet for a few seconds. Diana watched his face go through something she couldn't fully read, and her chest tightened because she had prepared herself for complicated. What happened next was not what she had prepared for. He reached across the table and took both of her hands and said, "Okay, let's figure this out together." Those were his words. She remembered them exactly because she had replayed them so many times in the 6 years that followed, trying to understand how a man who said that on a Thursday could be completely unreachable by the following Monday. Because that is what happened. Marcus called her Friday. He called her Saturday. Both calls were normal, a little quiet, a little heavy in the way that a conversation carries weight when the big thing hasn't been fully processed yet, but normal. On Sunday, Diana left him a voicemail because she didn't want to pressure him, but she wanted him to know she was thinking about things. He didn't call back. She tried again Monday morning. Straight to voicemail. Monday evening, same thing. By Tuesday, Diana had moved from concern to something colder and quieter. By Wednesday, she knew. She didn't know why, and she didn't know how, but she knew. The way you know certain things before you have the words for them. 3 weeks later, she received a text. One paragraph. Marcus wrote that he had done a lot of thinking and that he didn't think the relationship was in a place where it could sustain what was coming, and that he was sorry, and that he hoped she would be okay. Diana read it 4 times. Then she put her phone face down on the kitchen counter and stood there for a long time. There was no call to follow it up. No offer to talk. No explanation of what had changed between Thursday evening and the following Wednesday. Just a paragraph. And silence. What Diana did not know, what she would not know for another 6 years, was what had happened in the 48 hours between Marcus's Saturday phone call and the Sunday that changed everything. What she did not know was that Carol Webb had called her son that Saturday night, after his call with Diana, and had asked him to come over. And what she did not know was what Carol told Marcus when he got there. What she said, sitting across the kitchen table from her son in her house in Beaumont, with the careful, measured tone of a woman who had rehearsed what she was about to say, was this. She told Marcus that Diana had called her. She told him that Diana had reached out looking for money. That Diana had told Carol, in that phone call, that she had no intention of building a family with Marcus, that she saw the pregnancy as leverage, as a means to financial security, and that what she wanted was a settlement, not a relationship. Carol told Marcus that Diana had used words so cold, so calculating, that she had been up all night deciding whether to tell him. And then she told him the last piece. She said that Diana had asked her, directly, for $50,000 to end the relationship quietly and disappear, and that Carol, out of love for her son, had arranged it. That she had paid Diana $50,000 from a family account to go away and leave Marcus alone. Marcus sat with that for a long time. He was a man who trusted his mother more than he trusted almost anyone on earth. She was the one who had stayed. She was the one who had built him. And the story she was telling him was consistent with a fear he had carried quietly since the beginning. The fear that he had moved too fast, trusted too easily, opened a door he should have kept closed a little longer. Carol had planted seeds of that fear since the first time he brought Diana home, in the gentlest, most caring way a person can plant fear into someone who trusts them completely. And now she was telling him the seeds had been right all along. He believed her, not because he wanted to, but because she was his mother. Because she had never given him reason not to. Because when the two things you trust most in the world point in the same direction, it doesn't feel like being deceived. It feels like clarity. He sent the text. He stopped calling. He moved on in the numb, mechanical way that people move on when they're convinced they have no other choice. And Carol Webb went back to being the most important woman in her son's life, which was exactly what she had intended from the start. And Diana Calloway, 27 years old, newly pregnant, suddenly alone, woke up every morning and made a decision. The same decision her own mother had made, years before. She was going to show up. She was going to do the work. And she was going to keep moving. James and Lily were born on a March morning when Houston was doing that thing it does in early spring where it can't decide whether it's still winter or not. Cold in the morning, warm by afternoon, unsettled all the way through. Diana was alone in the hospital except for her friend Tanya, who had driven her there at 4 in the morning and stayed through the entire thing, holding her hand through the hard parts and crying harder than Diana did when the twins finally arrived. 2 of them. Diana had known from the ultrasound, but knowing and seeing are different things. She lay there in that hospital bed with one child in each arm and felt the full, enormous, terrifying weight of what the next few years were going to require of her. She went back to work 8 weeks later. She had to. Her mother's insurance had covered the birth, but the rent and the daycare and the groceries and the rest of it, that was on Diana, and only on Diana, and there was no version of a soft landing available to her. She found a daycare 3 blocks from her apartment that was affordable and clean and run by a woman named Miss Gloria, who called both twins by their names from the first week. Diana would drop them off before 7, get to the office by 8, work through lunch most days, pick them up by 6, make dinner, do the bath, read the books, and sit in the quiet after they fell asleep, trying to remember what it felt like to have an hour that belonged entirely to herself. She mostly couldn't remember. She did not date. She did not have the energy, and she did not have the trust. She told Tanya once that the thing she resented most about what Marcus had done, or what she believed Marcus had done, was not that he left. People leave. That is the part of loss that you can eventually metabolize. What she resented was that he left without the dignity of a reason. That paragraph of a text had cost her the ability to make sense of something she needed to make sense of in order to move forward. And she had spent years working around that absence of explanation the way you work around a wound that never quite closed. But she never let the children see that. That is the part of Diana Calloway that you have to understand before you can understand what came later. Whatever she felt in private, whatever she was carrying, she never let it land on James and Lily. She made a decision very early on about what she was going to tell them about their father, and she held that decision steady through every tired morning and every lonely evening for 5 years running. She was not going to raise her children on bitterness. She was not going to let them grow up believing they were the product of something broken. She was going to tell them that their father loved them. And so she did. She had one photograph of Marcus. It was from early in their relationship, the two of them at a friend's backyard party, laughing at something the camera had just missed. She had kept it in a box in the closet for the first year and a half because looking at it hurt in a way that was not useful. But when James was about 2.5, he found an old photo album she had left on a low shelf and started paging through it the way toddlers do. And he landed on that one photograph and pointed at Marcus and looked up at Diana and said, "Who's that?" And Diana, completely without preparation, looked at her son's face and understood that this was the moment. This was where she was going to decide the kind of story her children would carry about their own beginning. She sat down on the floor with him, took the photograph in her hand, and said, "That's your daddy." James stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "Where does he live?" And Diana said, "He lives far away. But he loves you very much." James nodded, satisfied with that the way 2-year-olds can be satisfied with almost anything when the person telling them looks certain. She put the photograph in a frame and set it on the bookshelf in the hallway where both children could see it. And for the next 3 years, they grew up knowing that man's face. When Lily was 4, she started carrying the photograph around the apartment with her. Not all the time, but often enough that Diana noticed. And one evening, while Diana was making dinner, Lily climbed onto the kitchen stool with the photograph in her hand and announced, very matter-of-factly, that when she found Daddy, she was going to ask him if he liked cheese pizza, because that was her favorite, and she wanted to make sure he knew. Diana laughed until her eyes watered, and then she stood at the stove for a long time afterward, not laughing at all. Marcus Webb, for his part, had spent the 6 years since the text message building a life that was functional in every visible way and quietly hollow in the way that lives become hollow when you've made a decision you've never fully made peace with. He was good at his job. He was responsible. He had moved up at the construction firm and was leading a team that handled some of the largest commercial projects in the greater Houston area. He had an apartment in the Midtown district. He had friends, a routine, evenings that were comfortable and mornings that were predictable. He had everything that looks like a life when you photograph it from the outside. What he did not have, what he could not seem to locate regardless of how deliberately he tried, was the sense that any of it was pointed toward something, that there was a direction, that the work meant something beyond itself. He had told himself for years that it was simply the nature of his 30s, the flat stretch you hear about after your early ambitions have been achieved and before the next chapter announces itself. He told himself it was normal. But on the quieter evenings, when the city outside his window was doing the ordinary business of being a city, there was something underneath the quiet that he had never been able to name. A gap. the specific shape of something that should have been there and wasn't. He would not understand what that gap was until a Tuesday afternoon when he was standing near the reception desk of a hotel where he was meeting a contractor for a project walkthrough, and two 5-year-old children came running across the lobby screaming the word that had been missing from his life without him knowing it was missing. He heard them before he saw them. He heard the word, Daddy, and registered it the way adults register the voices of children in public spaces, with a neutral, peripheral awareness, the assumption that whoever those children were calling for was somewhere behind him or to the side. He did not assume they were coming for him. Why would he? He did not have children. He knew that. His mother had made sure of it. And then the weight hit him. Both of them at once. One on each leg. Two small arms wrapped around his left leg, two more around his right, and two small faces looking up at him with the kind of absolute, unquestioning certainty that no adult has ever managed to manufacture and no child has ever needed to try. We knew you'd come back, Daddy, Lily said. Her voice was steady. She was not asking. She was confirming something she had already known. Marcus looked down at them. He looked at their faces. And something in his chest did something he did not have a word for. Not recognition. He had never seen these children before in his life. But something adjacent to recognition. Something that pulled at him from a place that was below thought. He looked up, and standing 30 feet away across that lobby, completely still, groceries on the floor around her feet, was Diana Calloway. Looking at him the way people look at things that should not exist. He said what he had to say. I'm sorry. I think you have the wrong person. I don't have children. It was the only true thing he knew at that moment, and he said it. And he watched something happen to Diana's face when he said it. Watched the confirmation she had been bracing for 6 years land on her in real time, and watched her reach for the children. James. Lily. Come here right now. Her voice was shaking. She was gathering them, pulling them in, turning toward the door. And then James looked up at his mother with the kind of 5-year-old clarity that adults spend their whole lives trying to locate, and said, But Mummy, it's the man from the picture. It's not your daddy. He's ours. Marcus Webb heard those words and felt the floor move. He looked at the children again. He looked at their faces. He did the kind of arithmetic that happens below the level of conscious thought, the arithmetic that the body does faster than the mind. And he heard himself say a name he had not said out loud in 6 years. Wait. His voice came out quieter than he intended. Diana stopped. She did not turn around. He said it again. Wait. Diana. She turned. And the two of them stood there in the middle of a hotel lobby in Houston, Texas, with their 5-year-old children between them on the marble floor, and nobody said anything for what felt like a very long time. They sat on a bench near the lobby entrance. James and Lily were on the floor between them with a pack of crackers Diana had pulled from her bag, completely unaware that the conversation happening over their heads was reassembling the entire architecture of their family's history. This is the part of the story that I need you to follow carefully, because it moves fast, and it moves in 2 directions at once. Diana spoke first. She told Marcus what the past 6 years had looked like. Not with anger. There was something past anger in her voice, something more final than that. She told him about the pregnancy alone, about the birth alone, about the years of working double shifts and eating dinner in shifts and answering the question of where Daddy is with the same gentle, carefully constructed answer 300 times over. She told him about the photograph on the bookshelf. She told him about Lily carrying it around the apartment. And then she stopped, because she had said what there was to say. And now it was his turn. Marcus told her about the phone call. He told her about his mother calling him in that Saturday night. He told her, word for word as he remembered it, what Carol Webb had said, about the call Diana had allegedly made asking for money, about the words Carol had said Diana used, about the $50,000. He watched Diana's face as he described it. He watched her expression move through disbelief, and then through something quieter and more terrible than disbelief. He watched her arrive at the same place he was arriving at in real time. The place where the story stopped making sense unless the story you had been told was never true. What money? Diana said. Those 2 words. Quiet. Almost to herself. What $50,000? Marcus, your mother never called me. I never called her. I never asked her for anything. She looked at him directly. I never wanted anything from you except to raise these children with you. That is all I ever wanted. Marcus Webb sat with those 2 words, what money, and felt 6 years of explanation disappear. Because the thing about a lie that has been load-bearing for 6 years is that when you pull it out, everything built on top of it goes with it. Every decision he had made. Every night he had spent in that apartment with the quiet gap underneath the routine. Every morning he had woken up and moved through the world without knowing that somewhere in Houston there were 2 children who went to sleep looking at his photograph and believing he was coming back. The lie had not just stolen time. It had stolen shape. It had stolen the entire form that his life was supposed to take. He confronted Carol Webb that same week. The full conversation, what was said, what Carol admitted, what she justified, is its own story, and we will get to the details of it. But the short version is this. Carol Webb did not deny it when she was confronted with specifics. She shifted. She reframed. She used the language that people use when they have done something they cannot quite bring themselves to call what it is. Language about protection, about what was best for everyone, about what Diana had really been like, about what Marcus's life would have become. She never said the words, "I lied." But she also could not account for the $50,000. She could not explain where it went, because it had never gone to Diana. It had never left the account Carol controlled. It had been a ghost payment invoked to make a story believable, and when Marcus went looking for it, there was nothing there. The money, investigators later confirmed, had come from a family account funded in part by an inheritance left to Marcus by his grandfather. Money that Carol had managed as custodian and that Marcus had never fully audited because he had trusted his mother completely. She had not given it to Diana. She had kept it. And she had kept it in the same way she had tried to keep everything else that connected to her son, not through love, but through the complete and calculated removal of any alternative. Carol Webb did not go quietly. That would have been too simple, and real life very rarely gives you simple. When Marcus came to her with what he had learned, she did what people do when a story they have maintained for years is suddenly surrounded from every direction. She told a different story. She said that Diana had been unstable. She said that the relationship had been bad for Marcus in ways he couldn't see at the time. She said that everything she had done had been out of love. That specific phrase, out of love, is the one that Marcus said later haunted him most. Because the terrifying thing about people who use love as a justification for control is that they usually believe it. Carol Webb almost certainly believed, at some level, that she had done what was best for her son. That is what made it so hard to name. It walked and talked and felt like something that deserved to be forgiven. Marcus did not press criminal charges. He consulted a lawyer. He documented everything. And then he made the decision that people make when they are looking at the person who raised them and trying to calculate what justice actually means in a situation that a courtroom cannot fully contain. He severed contact completely. He changed his phone number. He stopped visiting Beaumont. He did not explain himself publicly. He simply removed the relationship from his life the way you remove a thing that is causing damage, not with a dramatic announcement, but with a quiet, final step backward. Some people in his life thought that was too gentle. Some thought it was the only sane choice. Men who have had to look their own parents in the eye and decide what they owe them will understand the weight of that decision in a way that is very hard to explain to someone who hasn't had to make it. As for Carol Webb, the loss of her son was, by all accounts, the consequence she least anticipated and the one that hit hardest. She had done what she had done to keep him close, and it had done the opposite. The specific cruelty of that is not something I am going to spend time savoring because it doesn't deserve savoring. But it is worth noting, simply because it is true, that the thing she feared most, losing her son to a woman she didn't choose for him, was delivered to her by her own hand, in the end. Not by Diana, not by the twins, not by fate, by Carol, by what she decided to do with a phone call on a Saturday night 6 years ago. Marcus Webb requested a paternity test within the week. It confirmed what James and Lily already knew without needing science to tell them. He hired a family law attorney within the month. He and Diana began the slow, careful, deeply imperfect work of building something that did not have a name yet, because nothing in the cultural vocabulary quite covers what you build when two people have to parent together across the wreckage of a lie neither of them told. It was not a romance. It was not a reconciliation. It was something more practical and more honest than either of those things. It was two adults choosing, for the sake of 2 5-year-olds who had already been through enough, to put aside everything that had happened and simply try. The evening of that Tuesday, the same Tuesday, the one that had started with groceries in a hotel lobby, and two children running full speed across a marble floor. Diana took James and Lily to McDonald's. This is the part of the story that I keep coming back to when I think about who Diana Calloway actually is. Not the lobby, not the confrontation, not the 6 years of holding everything together alone. The part that tells you the most about her is the McDonald's, because she had just had the most destabilizing conversation of her adult life. She had just come face to face with the man whose disappearance had shaped the last 6 years of her existence. She had just learned that the story she had been living in, the one where Marcus had walked away on purpose, had chosen to leave, had looked at her and the life they could have built and decided against it, was a fiction assembled by someone else's fear and greed. She had just had all of that happen. And then she took her children to McDonald's and ordered them Happy Meals and sat across from them in a plastic booth and told them, calmly, that the man from the photograph was real and that he was sorry he had been away and that they were going to get to know him. Slowly, at their own pace. James ate 4 chicken nuggets and thought about it for a moment and said, okay. Lily dipped a fry in ketchup and asked, very seriously, whether Daddy liked cheese pizza. Diana said she wasn't sure, but they could ask him. Lily nodded. That was apparently sufficient. The conversation moved on to whether the toy in the Happy Meal was better or worse than the one from last time. Children are extraordinary in that way. They carry less history than we do, so they can move faster toward what they want. What James and Lily wanted had always been simple. They had said it 100 times in 100 different ways over 5 years. They just wanted the man in the photograph to be real. And now he was. The rest was details. There is no version of this story that ends cleanly. Diana carried things forward into that new arrangement that she will probably carry for the rest of her life. The particular weight of years spent trusting a lie without knowing it. The anger that has no clean target because the person who deserved it has been removed from the picture. The grief for time that no settlement and no apology can give back. Marcus carried his own version of that weight. The specific devastation of a man who trusted the wrong person and lost the right years as a consequence, who will always do the arithmetic of what he missed and find it doesn't balance. These are not things that resolve. These are things that you learn to carry differently over time, if you're lucky and if you do the work. What did resolve? What became, in the months following that Tuesday, something that looked increasingly like a life that worked, was the part that mattered most to James and Lily. They got their father. Slowly, carefully, on their terms, with patience from Marcus and protection from Diana, and a lot of chicken nuggets and conversations about cheese pizza, and, yes, it turned out Marcus was fine with cheese pizza. Lily was very satisfied by this information. I want to leave you with the question that I have been sitting with since I first pieced this story together. Not a question about Carol Webb, though there is plenty to say about people who use love as a cover story for control. Not a question about the legal mechanics, though the fact that what Carol did existed in a gray area of family law that made prosecution difficult is a conversation worth having another time. The question I want to leave you with is this. Marcus Webb made a choice when he walked away. He had a phone call. He had a mother he had trusted his entire life. He had no specific evidence that the story she was telling him was false. And in the absence of evidence, most of us reach for the story being offered by the person we love most. He took the story at face value, and he stopped calling. You can call that weakness. You can call it the result of a relationship that had been compromised long before Diana came into it. A relationship built on a foundation of one person's need for control and another person's gratitude for survival. You can call it what happens when a man hasn't yet learned to trust his own read on a situation over the read of someone who raised him. All of those things are probably true at once. But here is the part one keep coming back to. How many decisions in your own life were made based on a story that someone else told you? How many times did you trust someone's account of events over your own instincts, your own observations, your own quiet sense that something wasn't quite right? How many doors did you close to a person, to a possibility, to a version of your life, because someone you trusted told you it was the right thing to do? And how many of those stories, if you went back now and looked at them carefully, would turn out to be about that person's needs, not yours? Trust is not dangerous because most people will abuse it. Most people won't. Trust is dangerous because the people who do abuse it are almost never strangers. They are the ones closest to you. The ones with the longest history and the most plausible-sounding reasons and the most practiced way of making their version of events feel like the only version that makes sense. They are the ones who know exactly which fears to speak to, because they have been watching those fears for years. James and Lily are growing up, now knowing both of their parents. That is the fact at the center of this story that I want you to hold on to when everything else gets complicated. Two children who spent 5 years carrying a photograph got to put the photograph down. Two children who asked where daddy was got an answer they could actually use. And a man who had been living with a hollow, unnamed gap in the center of a life that looked fine from the outside finally understood what that gap was shaped like. It was shaped exactly like them. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know what part of this story got to you the most. Was it Carol? Was it Diana? Was it Marcus's choice to walk away? Or the reason he felt he had no other choice? I read every single comment, and I mean that. These conversations are why I do this. And if this story stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next.